Suite. And now, moderator Rod Lori.
Welcome back to a special program. This coming Tuesday, there's a Republican primary election to select the candidate who will run in the March general election to replace the late Congressman Bill Young. Joining me is Adam Smith, who is the Tampa Bay Times political editor. We'll be asking questions of the candidates. We've asked our guests to write their introductions, and here they are. Mark Bircher has lived in Pinellas County for 12 years. He's an international airline pilot, a retired Marine Corps Reserve Brigadier General, and Florida bar member. He believes in adherence to the Constitution, a smaller federal government with spending accountability, and restoration of personal liberty. Mr. Bircher, welcome. David Jolly was born in Dunedin. David Jolly has spent his entire career working on behalf of the people of Pinellas County, advancing and supporting community interests, and serving in multiple civic and community leadership roles here at home. David Jolly, thank you for coming. Great to have you. And Kathleen Peters is a 28-year resident, mother and grandmother in South Pinellas. She's been a small business owner, a city commissioner, mayor, and state representative, a problem solver with a history of getting the job done. Kathleen has been fighting for Pinellas long before it was her job. And Kathleen Peters, welcome to WEDU. Well, the way this debate will work is that a single question will be asked, and each candidate will have a minute to respond. We'll rotate the questions. A light on the table will indicate when their time is up. Our timekeepers are from the League of Women Voters of Hillsborough County. They are Mary Mahoney and her husband, Tom McGuigan. Well, the first question goes to David Bircher, or Mark Bircher, rather. I'm sorry about that. I want to ask you about health care, which seems to be a central issue in this campaign. I've heard all three of the candidates here say that they want to repeal the Obamacare plan. I want to ask about three provisions of the Affordable Care Act. Caps on out-of-pocket expenses. Parents can now keep their children on their plans up to the age of 26. And insurance companies are barred from turning down anybody with a pre-existing condition. Do you support those ideas within the ACA?
I support those ideas if those ideas came from the people. The idea that they're mandated by government is where I have the problem. My experience with government mandates just leads to disappointment most times, either through bureaucracy, inefficiency, or debt. I mostly believe Dr. Benjamin Carson answered that question at a prayer breakfast, and he said there's two things you need for effective health care: a health care system and a patient. And people actually got sick and recovered before the federal government decided that it was their job, in my opinion, to intrude outside the Constitution. So I would favor the people answering those questions through the legislative process at the state level.
Kathleen Peters, what about those three provisions? Do you support them?
Now, I've heard from a lot of people that this is something that they want. They don't want to be omitted from being able to have health insurance just because they have a pre-existing condition. And in Florida, you can be 26 and still be on your parents' plan. But it's an option, it's not a mandate. And so I think that mandates, I don't support mandates. I think mandates get overreaching and too far, and we shouldn't be taking away choice. And what we're doing with this new policy, this affordable health care policy, is we're taking away choice. And we're going away from patient-centered care to more government-focused care, and that concerns me. The quality of care greatly concerns me. And there's just so many other pieces, protecting Medicare and so many other things. So absolutely, it should be up to the people, and we should have private enterprise to be able to work with the people and provide them affordable health care.
David Jolly, those three provisions, do you support any of the three?
Sure. So your question was within the ACA, and the answer is absolutely not. I think Obamacare is wrong for the country. We're seeing rising premiums. We're seeing canceled policies. We're seeing small businesses dramatically affected. I think if Washington will get out of the way, we can have a private sector solution. I like to talk about a statutory framework that allows something like a term life insurance policy, where healthy individuals can enter young and have some type of price certainty, make it portable, decouple it from the employer. I think there's a way to reduce regulations, reduce the complexities of the federal government, and we can see a private sector market develop that will accommodate each of those provisions.
Okay. Adam, you're next.
I think we'll start with Ms. Peters. Social Security is often said to be the third rail of politics. You touch it and you're doomed, but if nobody touches it, Social Security will go insolvent. What needs to happen? What would be your approach?
I think we need to protect Social Security. I think we made promises to the people and we have to keep that. But I think we have to come up with sound solutions that, protect the future generations. Do I have a strategic, this is my plan at this point? I don't, but I certainly will look at what's already out there and bring the folks together to have that conversation. And that's the one thing
Anything specific, means testing or retirement age? Or-
Well, I think we have to look at everything, but what we have to focus on is needs always. We always have to look at needs first and protect those that are the most vulnerable citizens. Absolutely, first and foremost, that is our obligation to do that. But I believe that there's solutions, and that's what I've got great experience in, is bringing people down to the table and finding it.
And Mr. Jolly, any specific ideas there?
Sure, here's my plan. First, we actually have to own the out-year obligations that Washington has promised the individual. Just because Washington is bad at math does not mean the individual should have to pay the consequence of that. Long term, we're going to need reform to our entitlement spending to get our budget under control. Part of being a fiscal conservative, though, in my opinion, means also being responsible. Washington has made promises, and it's the responsibility of Washington to honor those. I think what we need to do is calculate the out-year obligations of Social Security, recognize that as debt, put it on the balance sheet, and figure out a way to begin a long-term pay down of that out-year obligation as debt. Listen, I have made a life plan, a financial plan based on promises the government made to me. I'm not too young for the government to continue to honor that. I think first we have to protect the promises that were made, and then we begin to look at long-term entitlement solutions.
Thanks. And Mr. Bircher?
Yes, there are distinctions in these programs. I include Medicare with Social Security. The property interest, you paid into it, your employer paid into it, you reasonably relied on the promise of government. The merit of that promise is a separate question. It is there, people relied on it, needs to be protected. For me, acknowledging that we got here really over an 80-year period, it's going to take a transition back to where the Constitution requires it, where there is fiscal and political responsibility, because how a society is judged is really how it takes care of its elderly and disabled people. I think the people here in the state are much more charitable and much more able to decide what needs to be done than a faraway bureaucracy.
Mr. Jolly, I want to ask you a question about about the minimum wage, rather. Pew Research says that if you calculate the minimum wage back to its peak in 1968, it would pay today $10.56 an hour. Right now, our minimum wage is substantially under that. Would you support a raise of the minimum wage?
Here's what I think we need to do with minimum wage. We need to take it out of the arbitrary decision-making of Congress. We know the impact of a minimum wage on employers, small businesses. The ability to hire an employee sometimes will be determined by what the current minimum wage is. There's a real balance between what the minimum wage is for the individual and the ability of that individual to actually find work based on the economic consequences of a arbitrary minimum wage. I'm in favor of studying whether or not it's appropriate to index minimum wage, take it out of the hands of Congress. Look, we do it with a lot of programs. We do it with Social Security, we have cost of living adjustments. We can argue the merits of what formula is used for that COLA, but the fact is there's a way to begin to address minimum wage without leaving it to the whims of members of Congress.
Mr. Bircher, would you support a raise in the minimum wage so that it has the buying power of 1968?
I would support the acknowledgement that the federal government does not have a role in this issue, because a minimum wage in downtown Manhattan is probably going to be different than it is in somewhere in Kansas. The people of the states are in a better position to know from a cost benefit and a market forces what that wage should be. And I think the proof that 2% of employees earn the minimum wage sort of speaks to the merit of that. Often when we see the mandated minimum wage, if it's raised, we see a cut in people that even have a job. I think the market, the local free market, is a better venue than, again, that bureaucrat deciding what people are going to get through an arbitrary metric.
Ms. Peters, minimum wage, would you raise it?
I'm with my colleagues here at the table. I do not believe, I believe the free market needs to determine that. It is 2% or just around 2% that the minimum wage is even impacted at this point, but the free market is what drives it. And I don't think that we need to have government pigeonholing business and the free market and its ability to be successful.
Okay.
Mr. Bircher, arguably the biggest debate going on in the state among Republicans is whether to take more than $50 billion in expansion, but money that would help more than 1 million Floridians, mostly working poor, get access to health insurance. Or the Republican governor says, yes, we should take it, Republican legislators say no. Where do you come down?
I come down first with this principle. One is the Constitution, I think that should be honored, but let's move off from that. We need to understand that when we talk about money from the federal government, it has zero money to give us except what we first put there. I think that's the mindset that we need to understand, that we are taxed and we have debt written on us.
But let's just assume that everybody at this table agrees the Constitution needs to be followed. Should Florida take that money or not take that money?
See, that to me is it is our own money. The question, and that's the problem with the discourse, in my opinion. Either one of those roads is still our money, and I'll make this point. Anytime our dollar goes to Washington first to maybe come back, it doesn't look like a dollar. That's why I say it should go, if we choose, to Tallahassee, where we have much better control. The idea of sending it to Washington and then asking for it back is what I want to get away from.
Who's next? Mr. Jolly.
Under the current restrictions that would be tied to the federal money, I don't think it's appropriate to accept the funds. The issue with the budget, and I know Kathleen can speak to this within the state, is the growth of Medicaid as the size of the budget. It's enormous. The problem when we have federal subsidies, we see this in a lot of projects, is that money ultimately goes away and the state is left to bear the burden. I don't think we've had a great track record of doing that. And usually what that means then is the state is left to bear the burden of debt spending or increased budgets within the state. So listen, if Congress has money to spend on programs and it doesn't have the back-end obligations that cripple our state economy down the road or require higher taxes in the state, then we should accept it. If it binds us, then we should.
And Ms. Jolly, you know every business group supported
I
it.
would correct you and say Ms. Peters, thank you. And you already know where I stand on this, you certainly know how I voted on it, and I have my track record on how I voted.
Against.
I voted against expanding Medicaid, and there are several reasons why. One, and I did my research and due diligence, and you and I have had this conversation, we don't have the infrastructure here to take on that many more people into Medicaid. I do not believe that it should be mandated down from the federal government onto the state and that burden put on the state. As our budget keeps growing and we pay more into Medicaid than we take away from education, and I believe the only way we fix this economy is through education. That's how you fix unemployment. And Medicaid, expanding it in that way from the federal government with their mandates and all the costs and regulations that come with it is not an affordable, reasonable option.
All right. Ms. Peters, my next question is for you. More and more coastal low-lying areas are flooding. Some inland areas, like parts of Seminole, are flooding, affected by the insurance crisis has really affected people, homeowners there. But I want to ask you a question I don't know if it's been asked that much on this campaign, and that is that the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration projects sea level rise of 1 to 2 feet in Florida by the year 2050. And by the end of the century, sea level is projected to rise as much as 4 to 6 feet around Florida. What would you do to deal with sea level rise?
Desalinization plants.
I'm not sure on all the sea level rise, and we've got our floodplain maps and everything that we have going in, and in future development we're addressing on that. We're addressing where we can build, how far back we have to build, and those maps are getting redrawn all the time, and the city and the state and DEP, they're all coming up with their new plans on how far you can build on our coastlines and so forth. Now the flood insurance is a completely different issue, and you said Seminole's flooding. Seminole's not flooding. We pay more into the federal government's insurance program than we collect. We don't have the flood insurance that we're paying for, and that has to be addressed first and foremost, and it has to be more than just the houses. They have to address it for small businesses, they have to address it for our snowbirds and so forth that have second homes here, because the plan that they have right now is not solvent and actuarially not sound.
Mr. Bircher, same question for you. Would you do anything about sea level rise, given the projections of how high seas are about to rise around Florida in the next 50 to 100 years?
First thing I would do is get a scientific, peer-reviewed, absolutely scientific study. I think that's a little hard to do right now. I'm not disputing that those results couldn't be there, but I first want to rely on absolute science. The function of government is to provide protection. That would come If that threat is there and reasonable, we would be electing our local state politicians to find out how we're going to address that, like we would any other problem, whether it's flood, beach renourishment, all of it. The federal government would then be in support of that effort, where they were originally created to support the states. And I see a role for the Geodetic Survey, for the Corps of Engineers, to come in and help the states solve this problem.
Mr. Jolly, what would you do about sea level rise based on those projections?
I don't think there's a role for the federal government to address it. I think we need to rely on the wisdom and the judgment of our state and local communities in terms of any response they might need for infrastructure. But I don't believe there's a role for the federal government.
Okay, Adam, your question.
Mr. Jolly, you have said you've never lobbied for offshore drilling, that one of the central planks in your campaign is to fight expanded offshore drilling, and yet you filled out paperwork saying you lobbied to expand offshore drilling. Explain how that is.
I did not fill out paperwork that said I lobbied for offshore oil drilling. What was listed in the Lobbying Disclosure Act report was a specific piece of legislation that was discussed during the meeting.
That called for expanded drilling.
Right, but if you'll notice, the Disclosure Act doesn't actually say if I lobbied for it or against it, or if I took a position on it. If I had opposed that bill, I would have had to fill out the same form. Listen, I had a responsibility of compliance for several of my clients to fill out accurately the Lobbying Disclosure Act regulations. That means if a piece of legislation was discussed in a meeting, my spirit of overcompliance, I felt it necessary to list that legislation was discussed. You will note that the client that took a position on this has since said I was never employed to lobby for that bill or for offshore oil drilling.
Ms. Peters, does overcompliance, does that make sense to you? What's your position on offshore drilling?
On offshore, well, you know, my role at the Chamber of Commerce, we hosted lots of symposiums when offshore drilling was a big issue. And we vetted that out very well. I believe we brought in experts from all over the state that came and discussed it. And Pinellas County, what I can tell you is it was very clear to me and our Chambers of Commerce locally here that offshore drilling was not an option. They certainly didn't want it in state waters, which was also a conversation of it. And I don't support, not only did I not support it in state waters, but I absolutely do not support it expanding it in the Gulf of Mexico because that is our military training field. The Obama administration has already expanded.
And you're comfortable with Mr. Jolly's explanation?
Oh, you're talking about that. Now, the question is, and as I read it, because I got a phone call on it, was that he didn't lobby for the interest of oil. Now, when you get into that fine tuning, do you lobby on the interest of oil? Well, you know, so there was transparency issues or labor issues or with the bill issue. What we need to do is make sure we have confidence in our elected officials and not that we aren't all human and we can slip of a tongue or say a wrong word that you PolitiFact.
Time's up. Thank you.
I'm on record and I believe that the current ban is good, especially for the time being as we're finding out the scientific consequences. But interestingly, in preparing over the months, I found out in the Florida legislature there's been some moves. So there is a disagreement of what should be done, and I think that's good at that level, and we can find out. 10.5 miles on our side, on the East Coast, I like that we're not drilling in there. My research has indicated that in this side of the DeSoto Canyon, we're not 100% sure where the oil is. There's been drilling here for over a century. We haven't found any. There probably would be if we drilled far enough. Right now, I like the ban on just the way it is.
Mr. Bircher, my next question is for you. Congressman Louis Gohmert of Texas says that the U.S. should be prepared to take military action against Iran despite the interim nuclear agreement. Do you agree?
I agree with prepared, but what are the details of that? My opinion is we should go back to what the founder said about when we do military action, and since the people pay in quote blood and treasure, the people are properly the ones that are supposed to decide. We're not supposed to have a king. In my opinion, a war powers resolution makes the president a king, expands to 2/3 of the permissible of the power to declare that. I think that threatens liberty. Pragmatically, we've declared war 5 times in this country, and we reached a military end state all 5 times. Since we stopped declaring wars, our outcomes have not been what we would like them on the first day of the war. I support the process. The process is at the floor of the Congress, debating the issues, finding out what the interests are, what the consequences are, what the back end costs are gonna be, and then have an up and down vote, so every representative goes home to their constituents and said, yes, I voted to send your sons and daughters for war, this is what it's gonna cost, or no. One of those is what I support.
Ms. Peters, same question. Should the U.S. be prepared to take military action against Iran?
My position isn't all that different. I think we should always be prepared, and we always need to keep our military strong. However, I don't think we need to be getting into another war, but Iran has also shown us that they can't be trusted. So, am I concerned? Absolutely am I concerned. But do I think this country's ready to go to war and start an active war? We already haven't finished the wars that we're involved in, and I don't think that's something you enter in lightly, and I think it needs to be vetted, and I'm not in favor of going to war at this point.
Mr. Jolly, same question.
Sure. And let me get two things on the record from the last question. First, unequivocally, I support the 230-mile ban off the coast of Florida in the Eastern Gulf. I support continued exploration in the central and western region. The client in question was not an oil interest, it was a free market think. With that said, I do not support what the president recently did in Iran. I think it was an insult to Israel. I think it gave a legitimacy to Rouhani that Ahmadinejad never had. And should we be prepared? Yes, at all times we should be prepared. And we should not take lightly negotiations with Iran. Iran has a greater ability to destabilize the Middle East and to create a conflict, which we do not want to be in. Negotiating with Iran was a wrong decision. It was an insult to Israel.
All right. Well, we're down to the last few minutes of the program, and it's time for closing statements. And we're going to start with Mr. Jolly, then go to Ms. Peters, and go to Mr. Bircher. David Jolly, your closing statement.
Sure. Rob, Adam, thank you for the opportunity to be here. Listen, this is a great day for Pinellas County. It's a great day for District 13. It's a great day for District 13 Republicans. We know how to have a primary. We've had a great primary. We have 3 great candidates here. I am confident that on Tuesday we are going to elect a candidate that can rightfully represent the interests of Pinellas County. I got into this race because I believe I bring unique qualifications. I believe I bring experience. I am proud of my record working alongside my mentor Bill Young for nearly 20 years on behalf of the people of this county, of this district. And I believe there's an opportunity for me to continue to serve this county and impact this county on day one based on that experience. I thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you. Ms. Peters.
You know, I got into this race because I felt it was important that Pinellas County had the opportunity to have a choice. And so that's what I brought to the table, was to have a choice. I believe that my track record, both serving at local government and at state government, gives me absolutely the experience that we need to represent our local government, Pinellas County, in Washington. I understand the role of small government, I understand the role of local government, I understand the role of state government, and I certainly understand the role where the federal government needs to be and how they need to shrink it so that our country can be more successful. It has been a privilege to live and serve Pinellas County for the last 28 years, either through volunteer work or public service. And I'm looking forward to this election.
Thank you. Mr. Bircher.
Yes, thank you very much for the opportunity of this forum. I think I'm the best qualified because of my career. It's about results, it's about getting things done. In the military, you're judged your whole career on how well you can accomplish things. In the airlines, you always are focused on the service to your customers. As a lawyer, it's the interest of your client. All those mean service. I think combined, my whole life has been preparing for this job. In closing, if you think you can take care of your family and yourself better than the federal government, I think you should vote for me. If you think you know how to spend your own money better than an imperial decree from Washington, I think you should vote for me. If you think your federal government and its public servants should serve you rather than the other way around, I think I'm your candidate. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, candidates, very much. Mark Bircher, David Jolly, and Kathleen Peters, thank you. It's great to have you here, and thank you, Adam Smith. And thank you very much for watching this program. The primary election for the District 13 congressional election is this coming Tuesday. The general election is on March 11th, and we'll be covering this race closely on Florida This Week. Thanks for watching the program. You can watch the show online on the WEDU.org